First of all, I want to say good morning to everyone. And we had invited someone from the school administration here this morning, and they declined to show up because of the litigation that's pending. But as some of you may know, the school board issued a statement this morning, and I want to read that starting off. We thank the grand jury for their report on the investigation of January 6, 2023 Richneck School shooting and their recommendations. We have implemented a number of positive changes since this incident and will continue to do so in the future. Safety of students and staff remain a top priority for the school board. Some of you may have already received that because that was released today. The first thing I want to do is do some thank yous. I want to thank the press and everybody else who's in the room for being here today. I want to thank the people at the podium, Travis White, who's one of my deputies, Gabe Morgan, who's the sheriff, Steve Drew, the chief of police, and Josh Jenkins, one of our senior attorneys here in the office. I also want to thank Deputies Blythe and Briggs, who are here right now. They are the first two law enforcement people to respond to Richneck. And their quick response is a credit to the sheriff, who has trained and mentored and supported folks. And also, the police quickly responded as well. And I want to thank Steve Drew for everything he's done to hire effective, professional, competent men and women who responded quickly to the scene on January 6th. I also want to thank the citizens of Newport News for their continuing support and prayers and trust in the men and women who work in the Newport News Commonwealth Attorney's Office. Last but not least, I want to thank the grand jurors because they were ordinary citizens who took on an extraordinary task and did an amazing job. If you read the report, then you know they were thorough and they took this seriously. On January 6, 2023, the eyes of the nation turned to Newport News, not because of the extraordinary leadership in this city, but because on January 6th, a 6-year-old took a gun from his mother's house, went to Richneck Elementary School, pulled that gun out on his teacher, and shot her, Abigail Zwerner. On that date, on January 6th, lives changed forever. Because the safety of schools and administrators and students are an important and top priority for this office, we were determined to answer 3 questions. First, what happened on January 6th? Second, why did it happen? And third, what can be done to ensure that it doesn't happen again? Well, when we are perplexed in this office as an elected official, and I'm sure that Steve Drew and Gabe Morgan will tell you the same thing. When we have tough questions that we need to answer, we call on the collective wisdom of the citizens of our community. And so we did that. Because the most effective way to do that was to ask that a special grand jury be impaneled. So in September of last year, we filed a motion with the Circuit Court for the City of Newport News asking that a special grand jury be impaneled to answer the critical questions that I just raised. And I know I speak for Josh and Travis when I tell you that on day one, we were impressed with the level of seriousness and commitment that these ordinary citizens made to this critically important task. Now, the grand jurors asked us to make sure that the report that hopefully you've had a chance to read before you came today be made public, and we did that yesterday. I'm sure that if you read the report, you found several things. First, the report was incredibly thorough and at times brutally honest because it's a testament that they took their jobs very seriously. I'm sure that any reader of that report expressed when they saw it concern about the safety issues that existed at Richneck. I'm sure that any reader of that report was equally as concerned about documents that were missing and still cannot be found to this day. I am also equally confident that those persons who had the opportunity to read that report were very troubled when they read the section on the effects on guardians and parents and children. Because as you know from the report, a number of the parents of the students in Mrs. Zwerner's classroom asked that their children be transferred to another school. And I'm sure that some of you, before you read that, you thought that the only victims in this case was Abby Zwerner. But when you read that section, you knew there were other victims. There was the friend who actually told one of the administrators that the shooter had a gun. And I'm sure as you read the report, you saw that friend thought and feels guilty today because nobody listened to him. And his mother had to put him in counseling, and she's in counseling herself. And I'm sure you read with concern that when the mother went to the administration and tried to get her son transferred, they were refused. And she had to hire a lawyer and add expense to her trauma before her son could be transferred. I'm sure you read about the single mother whose daughter was an excellent student before this happened. And when she went to the school system and asked that her daughter be transferred, she was denied. And she had to sell her house and move to another jurisdiction to get the education for her kid that her kid deserved. I'm sure you read about the young boy whose parent went to the school to get him, and he cried hysterically, and he wouldn't be transferred either. I'm sure you read about the grandmother, who was a hero in this case, who in the office took a child, not her child, but a child, and hid him behind a copier and a wall. And she's the one who administered first aid to Abby Zwerner when she came in that day and collapsed on the floor. And I'm sure you read with concern that she's going to counseling as well. I'm sure you looked at this report and saw the things that troubled you. And we are troubled as well. Now, when you look at the report, there's a lot of bad news. There's good news too. And I want to share that good news with you in my last remarks. Because now, in the city of Newport News, we have a leader who is determined to change the situation. A compassionate professional who took on the responsibility in August of last year of being our superintendent, Dr. Michelle Mitchell. Now, Dr. Mitchell's concerns, her mission, is to ensure that every child in the city of Newport News has a safe place to learn. Her passion is to make sure that every child in Newport News gets a first-class education, a world-class education. And we look forward to working with Dr. Mitchell to achieve those two goals. That's the end of my remarks. I'll be happy to answer any questions that anybody has on this issue.
What do you want to say about Ebony Parker's criminal liability in the eyes of this special branch?
Well, all I want to say, Andy, is the report speaks for itself. I mean, I think they were very clear about what they thought. They were very clear about the evidence that led to the conclusions they led to. And I think it's crystal clear.
You've been around the block a few times.
I have.
What did you think?
Quite a few times.
What did you think when you read that? How disappointed were you? How floored were you about what happened in that school on that day?
I was appalled because my children went to public school here. I went to public school in Newport News. The lapses in security were appalling and should never have happened. And I think anybody who read that report had the same reaction. How could this happen? How could this happen? How could these flaws, when they were brought to people's attention, because as you remember from the report, several parents said, we'll have a fundraiser to get some of these things fixed. And they were denied. And I think it's appalling. Anybody in this room or in this city should be concerned about it. Yes, sir.
Is the investigation ongoing, and could more school officials potentially be charged?
Well, the investigation is ongoing, and what we do, as we always do, we go where the facts and the law lead us.
Is it ongoing by a grand jury or by?
No, sir, the grand jury is finished. They've given us our marching orders, and we'll follow them. Yes, ma'am.
There are several questions related to the missing documents that people have been wanting to find. Is there any sort of investigation into that, or is there any belief that someone may have tampered with these documents?
We don't know the answer to your second question, but the answer to the first question is we have a partnership now with Dr. Mitchell because we've met with her several times since these events took place. And so as a result of that partnership, we hope to discover where those documents are and what happened to them. But as of yet, we don't know the answer to that question.
To follow up to her question.
Yes, sir.
Recommendation 9, There should be a continuing investigation into the missing files and documents to determine if Dr. Parrott and/or other parties should be charged with obstruction of justice.
Yes, sir.
Do you agree there was obstruction of justice?
I agree that the files are missing. Obstruction of justice, as you know, is a criminal charge that requires certain elements. And as I said, what we'll do is we'll work with the school system to try to ferret out how this happened. And based on the facts and the law, if we believe somebody else needs to be charged, then trust me when I tell you they will be charged.
Will there be even more charges for Ms. Parker to come, or is it just these 8 charges?
It's just these 8 charges. Because those were the charges that the grand jury decided on.
And was it true that those charges were for every bullet that was in that child's gun?
That is correct. In fact, that's stated in the report.
But
Yes,
there
sir.
were 15 children in the room.
Yes, sir.
So could there have been 15 charges?
Well, whether there could be or not, the grand jury, one of the reasons why we impanel them is because we trust them. And whatever they decided, we were willing to live with. Because we knew, again, from the start, we knew that these people took this very seriously. We knew they were very conscious about it. Because when they came, the first day they showed up, they had no idea why they were there. And you could tell, and I think I speak for Travis and Josh when I tell you, when we explained to them that this Richneck shooting was what this was about, you could see immediately that they took this very seriously.
Can you explain why they decided to make it public? Are these reports typically not public, and they asked it to be?
It depends on the report, because I've conducted a number of special grand juries since I've been the Commonwealth's attorney, and it depends on the report. But again, I think this is an indication of how seriously they took their job and how they were determined to help the system improve. And that's why they wanted to make it public.
But these reports are not always public.
No.
Sometimes, but.
No, they're always sealed, because what happens before the grand jury is secret. And so there has to be a special request before the judge to have them released.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Did you guys recommend that it be public, just as part of the healing process, or?
Do we recommend that, gentlemen? Yeah.
So you wrote, okay.
You know, one of the things, Peter, that we thought once we read it, that it was important for every citizen in the city to have access to it. Because I know there was a lot of concern about this. I know there was a lot of angst about it. I know that the parents, particularly who had children in Mrs. Zwerner's class, thought they had not had an opportunity to be heard. There were teachers and administrators who thought they had not had an opportunity to be heard. So this report gives everybody an opportunity to be heard. They express their concerns honestly and fairly, so that everybody in the city of Newport-News knows that this is an important matter. Yes, sir.
There seems to have been a shift in recent years of more accountability of adults who have children in their care, whether they're parents or teachers or even police officers. Do you think this is part of that greater sort of paradigm shift towards accountability? And with these charges been filed 20 years ago?
You know, I don't look at this as some larger battle. What we do in our office and what we always do, we follow the facts and the law wherever they lead. And that's thanks to Steve and his people, because they do very thorough jobs in terms of presenting evidence to us. We look at the evidence in this case as we do in every case. And then we try to apply a law to the evidence, and if that means there's a case we can prove beyond a reasonable doubt, then we charge it.
To follow up to his question, I keep hearing about this could set a precedent for who we're charging and how we're charging them, and teachers who are charging.
Right.
What is the precedent that would be coming from this case?
Well, quite frankly, Andy, until I heard somebody say that on a news report yesterday, I never thought about this as precedential. I simply think about this as us doing our jobs. And so whether it has any precedent or not, it is not really relevant to what we do, and it has no bearing to this in the decisions we make.
Have you ever charged anybody, any administrator, with child neglect previously?
No.
Or any-
We have not, as far as we have not.
As I know.
Do
We
you
have
know of
not.
any others around the country where you've seen something like that?
I have not. Yes, sir.
Is there a message you hope to send to other administrators about how to behave going forward?
The message, I think, if there's a message at all to be sent, is that the safety of children and staff and administrators should be taken seriously. That it is incumbent upon all of us to look at systems and make sure that they are safe. You know, people say that children are our future, and that's certainly true. And parents send their children to school, and the last thing they should be thinking about is my kid going to come home? That should never be a factor. And so we do everything in our power to ensure that it's not. Yes, ma'am.
Is there a statement that you would like to make to the families of Richneck Elementary who might have felt isolated throughout the
I think the statement that we make to Abby and also to the parents particularly is that we hear you. We hear you. We feel your pain. We see your trauma. We pray for you. We pray for your children. We hope that in spite of this trauma, that somehow, some way, God will work this all out and your kids will be made whole. And any role we can play in ensuring that that happens, then every resource in this office will be devoted to it.
And just as a complete clarification, this is completely separate than the lawsuit that Abby Zwerner is also bringing in.
That is correct. Well, our job in this case had nothing to do with our lawsuit. Absolutely nothing. Now, as I said before, the purpose of this grand jury was to find out what happened, why it happened, and recommendations so it won't happen again. And again, I have found in the time I've been the Commonwealth's attorney that when you call upon the citizens of our community, their common sense, their good judgment, their wisdom always helps resolve problems.
Mr. Gwynn,
Yes, sir.
some could argue that on page 10 shows the gross example of the lack of humanity, everything else aside, that Ms. Werner had been shot. She goes to the principal's office and there is a lobby there. Mrs. Foster opened the door, saw Ms. Werner, who had been shot, and shut the door again, telling the two kids in her office to get into the bathroom. Ms. Foster then emerged from her office while the grandmother that you referred to applied pressure with a rag to Ms. Werner's wound until the paramedics arrived. Talk to me in the event that you think that is an example of gross inhumanity.
Of course. You'll also notice from the report that in determining what happened in that office, the grand jury noticed specifically there was some conflict between exactly what happened based on what they heard from witnesses, and they made a choice about who to believe. So clearly, we ride with the grand jury, but I think anybody in this room, or anybody in this city, anybody who reads that report should be disturbed by it, assuming it's true, should be disturbed by it. Because part of the responsibility of administrators is to ensure the safety of their staffs, to set the example. One of the things that I tell the people that work for me, and there's a bunch of them in this room, and there's a couple of them behind me, is that everything you do and say sends a message. And what is the message that you want to send by your conduct? The message that should have been sent to Abby and to the grandmother and to the child in that room is that we're going to do everything we can to protect you. We know this is a dangerous situation, so we're going to do everything we can to protect you because that's what we signed up for.
They outline Ms. Parrott's suspicious lack of memory. What do you want to say about that? They have a whole category right there on page number 17.
Sure, I've read it several times. And what I would say about it is, it speaks for itself.
What criminal liability does she have?
Well, based on what we know now, we're not sure. Because why she had no memory, we don't know the answer to that. Where that file ended up, we don't know the answer to that. But again, my answer to that question would be, once we finish investigating in partnership with the administration office, we'll go where the facts and the law lead us.
Judge Hoffman said this morning that she faced a minimum of 1 year in prison, but one of your colleagues said that's not quite the case. The minimum isn't necessarily 1 year.
Josh?
Yeah, the sentencing could be 0 days to 12 months in jail or 1 year to 5 years in prison. And that's the distinction. Judge Hoffman was referring to the potential prison sentence, advising of the potential prison sentence as a standard operating procedure.
For Dr. Parker?
Per charge,
Per
correct.
charge. And so it's, one more time, 0?
It could be 0 to 12 months in jail or 1 year to 5 years in prison.
Just to clarify.
Yes, sir.
The investigation going forward will be done by
Us.
your office,
That's correct.
not the police department.
Well, we may ask for the assistance by the police department if we need it. But again, please understand that it's a partnership between us. We're like Siamese twins. In order to get things accomplished, we have to go in the same way. And so Steve and his department have been tremendous partners for us. And we rely on Steve. I seek Steve's counsel all the time. He seeks mine. And he's my brother from another mother. Right, Steve? All right. Yes, sir.
Since the statute of limitations on obstruction of justice isn't that a misdemeanor, correct? So,
Obstruction is a misdemeanor.
so since it's been more than a year since this happened, can you still bring obstruction of justice as a charge?
Obstruction of justice is 1 year from the date that it occurred. But an investigation would reveal when exactly acts of obstruction occurred, if they did, and whether they were ongoing in nature or not. And that could affect the timeline of charging abduction. Additionally, the investigation could lead to facts of other crimes, and if it led there and the facts in the law justified it, as Mr. Gwynn pointed out, we would charge those crimes.
Let me get some clarification. So is the clock ticking from the issuance of this report or from what happened more than a year ago, which would protect her from the law on that? Yes?
The clock is ticking from the time an act of obstruction occurred. And we don't know, and an investigation could reveal acts of obstruction that did occur within the last year. We don't know. We also don't know whether an investigation would lead to charges that don't have that 1 year limitation.
What would those be?
Almost anything in the Code of Virginia that's not misdemeanor.
Because it is possible that we are now outside the year for the obstruction of justice and that she could be fully protected against any charges of that.
But let me answer that. But, Andy, that applies to anyone. Because as Peter pointed out, there's a 1 year statute of limitations. And if charges are not brought within that 1 year, then there are no charges that can be brought. And so she's no different from anybody else. Any other questions?
Because that grand jury wanted you to continue investigating that.
Sure.
It sounds like that's going to end up at a dead end.
Well-
Find something and you're outside the statute of limitation.
Well, you know, as I said before, we follow the facts of the law wherever they go. Sometimes they're dead ends, sometimes they're open freeways. Any other questions from anybody? Then, thank you very much for coming. That concludes our press conference.